Shadows lurked in the fog-shrouded streets of London, where a deadly secret threatened to topple the British government. A single gunshot echoed through the halls of Parliament, silencing a key figure forever. Welcome to the Parliament plot, Poirot and the Law of Silence. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and enjoy this thrilling tale. If you're hooked, subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us, and tell us in the comments from where you are watching this. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Summons Hercule. Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective with his impeccable moustache and sharp mind, sat in his cosy London apartment on a chilly autumn evening. He was sipping his tisane, a herbal tea that he favoured for its calming properties, when there was a knock at the door. His valet Georges opened it to reveal a tall, stern-faced man in a dark overcoat. The man introduced himself as Inspector Japp from Scotland Yard, but Poirot could see the worry etched on his old friend's face. Something big was afoot, something that required Poirot's unique talents. Japp entered the room, removing his hat and glancing around as if to ensure they were alone. "Poirot, my friend," he said in a low voice, "we need your help. There's been an incident in Parliament, a plot that's shaking the foundations of our democracy." Poirot raised an eyebrow, intrigued. He gestured for Japp to sit and poured him a cup of tea, though Japp preferred coffee. "Tell me everything, Inspector, from the beginning," Poirot urged, leaning forward with his green eyes gleaming. "It started 2 weeks ago," Japp explained. "A member of Parliament, Sir Reginald Hawthorne, received anonymous threats. He was pushing for a new law, the Law of Silence, which would restrict certain discussions in the House to prevent leaks of sensitive information. Some saw it as necessary for national security, others as a gag order on free speech. Hawthorne was found dead in his office last night, shot through the heart. No weapon at the scene, doors locked from inside. It looks like suicide, but we suspect foul play. There are whispers of a conspiracy involving high-ranking officials." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "The little grey cells, they are already at work," he murmured. He asked for details about Hawthorne's enemies. Japp listed several. Lady Victoria Ashford, a vocal opponent in the House, who argued the law would stifle democracy. Colonel Marcus Black, a retired military man with ties to intelligence who supported it, but had argued with Hawthorne over details. And young MP Elias Thorne Hawthorne's protégé, who stood to gain from his mentor's death. There was also a mysterious figure seen lurking around Parliament, a foreigner with a limp. As Japp spoke, Poirot paced the room, his hands clasped behind his back. He stopped suddenly. "The Law of Silence, eh? What exactly does it entail?" Japp pulled out a folder and handed it over. "It proposes that certain debates, especially those involving state secrets, be conducted in closed sessions with severe penalties for leaks. Hawthorne believed it would protect the nation from espionage, but critics say it's a step toward tyranny." Poirot skimmed the documents, his mind racing. Examples of such laws exist in other countries, he noted, like the Official Secrets Act. But this seems more draconian. He thought of practical tips for investigating such cases. Always examine the victim's routine, look for anomalies in behavior, and question those closest first. In this instance, start with the locked room mystery. How could the killer escape? Japp mentioned the office had a secret passage rumoured from Victorian times, but unconfirmed. Poirot smiled. The classics never fail. "We must inspect the scene tomorrow." He offered Japp more tea, and they discussed strategy. Poirot emphasized the importance of order and method. List all suspects, gather alibis, check for motives. As the evening wore on, Japp left promising to arrange access. Poirot sat back reflecting. This plot in Parliament, it reeks of betrayal and hidden agendas. The Law of Silence might be the key, but silence can be broken with the right questions. To wrap up this chapter, we've set the stage with Poirot's summons and the basics of the mystery. The locked room, the suspects, the controversial law all point to a web of intrigue. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, where Poirot arrives at the crime scene and uncovers the first clue. Chapter 2. Arrival at the crime scene. The next morning dawned grey and misty over London as Hercule Poirot made his way to the Houses of Parliament. He stepped out of the black cab, adjusting his hat and coat against the damp air. Inspector Japp was waiting at the entrance, his face grim under the iconic clock tower known as Big Ben. Poirot nodded a greeting and they proceeded, inside through the grand halls, echoing with the footsteps of history. This was no ordinary visit. The weight of a potential scandal hung heavy like the fog outside. Poirot's mind was already buzzing with possibilities, ready to apply his meticulous methods to unravel the mystery. They entered Sir Reginald Hawthorne's office, a spacious room lined with oak, bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes on law and politics. The desk was cluttered with papers, a half-finished letter and an ornate inkwell. In the centre lay the chalk outline where the body had been found, a stark reminder of the violence that had occurred. Poirot paused at the threshold, his eyes scanning every detail. Order and method, he reminded himself. One must observe before concluding. Japp closed the door behind them and locked it, demonstrating how it had been secured from the inside. See, Poirot? No way in or out except through this door or the window, which was bolted shut. Poirot circled the room slowly, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug. He examined the window first, noting the latch was indeed fastened, and there were no signs of tampering. Dust on the sill was undisturbed, suggesting no one had climbed in from outside. Next he turned to the desk, kneeling to inspect the floor around the outline. A faint scuff mark caught his eye, perhaps from a shoe, but it was too vague to identify. He picked up a magnifying glass from his pocket, a tool he always carried for such occasions, and peered closer. Practical tip for any aspiring detective: always carry a lens. The smallest detail can crack the case wide open. As he rose, Japp handed him the police report. Hawthorne was alone, according to the guard. He heard the shot around midnight, rushed in with a master key and found the body. No gun in sight, which rules out suicide unless the weapon vanished into thin air. Poirot chuckled softly. Ah, but things do not vanish, Inspector. They are hidden or removed. Let us search methodically. He began with the bookshelves, pulling out volumes at random. Behind one row he found a loose panel. With a gentle push, it swung open, revealing a narrow passage, dusty and cobweb-filled. The secret passage, Japp exclaimed. Rumours were true. Poirot shone a flashlight, another essential tool, into the gloom. It leads downward, perhaps to the basement or an exit. But look here, footprints in the dust, recent ones. Someone used this recently. He noted the size and tread, suggesting a man's shoe size 10, perhaps. Practical example. In investigations, measure footprints against suspects. It can eliminate or incriminate. They followed the passage briefly. It twisted through the old stone walls, emerging in a service corridor near the back entrance. Easy escape for a killer, Japp muttered. But why lock the door from inside if escaping this way? Back in the office, Poirot pondered that. The killer wanted it to look like suicide but forgot the gun, or couldn't retrieve it. No, the gun must be here. He tapped the walls, listening for hollow spots, then moved to the fireplace. Soot covered the grate, but he donned gloves, another tip. Preserve evidence, don't contaminate, and probed inside. His fingers brushed metal. Triumphantly, he pulled out a revolver still warm. No cold, but recently cleaned. Serial number filed off, Japp noted. Clever, but not clever enough. Poirot examined the gun, sniffing the barrel. Fired once recently. Matches the single shot heard. But why hide it here? Perhaps interrupted or to frame someone. He bagged it for forensics. Now let's question the guard. They summoned the night watchman, a burly man named Wilkins, who fidgeted under Poirot's piercing gaze. I was on rounds, sir. Heard the bang, broke in with the key. Sir Reginald was slumped over, no one else around. Poirot asked about visitors that evening. Lady Ashford stopped by, argued about the bill, then left. Colonel Black was here too, discussing amendments. Young Thorne arrived, last stayed briefly. Details emerged. Lady Ashford was furious, calling the law of silence a muzzle on truth. Colonel Black supported it but wanted stronger penalties. Thorne seemed eager, perhaps too eager for promotion. And the mysterious foreigner. Wilkins saw a man with a limp loitering outside, but he vanished before questioning. Poirot jotted notes in his little black book. Motives abound. Opposition, ambition, security concerns. Practical tip. Build a suspect timeline. Alibis can crumble under scrutiny. Next, Poirot inspected Hawthorne's papers. The half-finished letter was to the Prime Minister urging passage of the law, warning of leaks that could endanger agents abroad. An example leaked document from last year exposed a spy ring costing lives. The law would impose silence oaths with jail for breaches. Critics like Ashford feared it for suppressing scandals like corruption in high places. Poirot found a crumpled note in the wastebasket. "Meet me at midnight urgent." No signature. Clue number 1, he announced. Handwriting analysis needed. He demonstrated his method by comparing it to samples from suspects' files Japp provided. Not Ashford's elegant script, nor Black's bold hand. Thorne's was similar but not exact. Perhaps forged. Another tip: forgeries often miss personal flourishes. Study loops and pressure. As they delved deeper, Poirot noticed a faint perfume on the note feminine. Perhaps Ashford's, but she denied writing it later when questioned briefly by phone. The room held more secrets. Under the desk, a loose floorboard creaked. Lifting it, Poirot found a hidden safe cracked open, empty. What was inside? Japp checked records. Hawthorne kept sensitive files there. Stolen, perhaps the real motive. The plot thickens, Poirot said. Theft disguised as murder or vice versa. They sealed the scene and headed to interview suspects properly. Lady Victoria Ashford met them in her nearby office. A poised woman in her 40s with sharp features. "I oppose the law, yes, but murder? Absurd. She had an alibi, dining with colleagues till 11. But the note? Not mine, she insisted." Poirot noted her perfume matched the scent. Coincidence or clue? Colonel Blackgruff and military admitted arguing, but supported Hawthorne. Alibi, home alone, unverifiable. Thorne, nervous and young, claimed mentorship, but eyes shifted when asked about inheritance of the seat. The mysterious foreigner remained elusive. Poirot suggested checking immigration records, but that would take time. For now, the first clue, the hidden gun, pointed to inside job. Someone knew the passage and fireplace. Practical tip: map building layouts. Secrets hide in architecture. As the day waned, Poirot and Japp reviewed findings over lunch at a nearby pub. The locked room solved by passage gun, hidden note, stolen safe, all woven into a tapestry of deceit. The law of silence aimed to protect, but perhaps silenced Hawthorne for knowing too much. Wrapping up this chapter, Poirot has delved into the crime scene, exposing hidden paths and weapons, setting suspicions on key players. The intrigue builds with stolen secrets and shady alibis. Hold on for Chapter 3, where Poirot interrogates the suspects, and a shocking revelation emerges. Chapter 3: Interrogations and the Shattered Alibi. Hercule Poirot. Settled into a small interview room at Scotland Yard, the afternoon sun slanting through barred windows and casting long shadows across the table, Inspector Japp had arranged for the 3 main suspects to arrive one after another. No lawyers yet, just informal chats to loosen tongues. Poirot arranged his notebook, a fresh pencil, and a small tin of pastilles on the table, then folded his hands with perfect symmetry. He believed the psychology of the room mattered. Plain walls, no distractions, the suspect must feel observed, yet not trapped. Practical tip for questioning: let silence do half the work, people rush to fill it with truth or lies. Lady Victoria Ashford entered first, gliding in with the confidence of someone used to debates. She wore a deep green suit, her hair pinned severely. Poirot offered a chair and a polite smile. "Madam, you oppose the law of silence with passion, tell me why." She leaned forward, eyes flashing. "Because it hands power to the few to bury scandals. Last year, a minister funneled contracts to his brother-in-law, millions vanished. Open debate exposed it. This law would gag us." Poirot nodded. "And Sir Reginald? A stubborn fool," she said, voice rising. "We argued at 9 that night. I left furious but alive." He slid the crumpled note across the table. "Your handwriting, perhaps?" She studied it, lips tightening. "No, the slant is wrong. And that perfume is common enough." Poirot inhaled subtly, yes, the same jasmine note from the office. He asked about her movements after leaving. Dinner at the Savoy with 3 MPs till 11, then home by cab. Japp would verify receipts and witnesses. Practical example: cross-check restaurant logs. Cabbies remember fares especially titled Ladies. Lady Ashford stood to leave. Find the real killer, monsieur, not the loudest opponent. Poirot watched her go, sensing steel beneath the elegance. Colonel Marcus Black arrived next, boots polished, medals glinting. He sat ramrod straight. The law is vital, he barked. Spies listen in corridors. Last month the clerk sold troop movements for a pittance. Silence saves lives. Poirot tilted his head. You argued with Hawthorne over penalties. Black snorted. He wanted fines, I wanted courts-martial. Discipline, not debate. Alibi, home reading dispatches. Alone. Poirot noted the limp as Black shifted a war wound perhaps matching the lurker. Your boots Colonel size 10? Black glanced down. 11, but I wear 10s for comfort. Close enough. Poirot produced a photograph of the footprint from the passage. Recognize the tread? Military issue, Black admitted, but thousands wear them. He denied using the passage, claiming ignorance, though old plans showed officers' quarters nearby in his youth. Practical tip. Old soldiers know old buildings, study service records for overlap. Black grew impatient. I respected Hawthorne murder is cowardice. Poirot let him leave, but not before noticing ink stains on his fingers, fresh blue matching the note. Young Elias Thorne entered last sweating, despite the cool room. He was barely 30, ambitious eyes darting. Sir Reginald was my mentor, he stammered. The law would secure my future too. Poirot offered a pastille which Thorne declined. You visited at 10:30, why? To drop revised clauses. He left at 11:15, Hawthorne alive and well. Poirot leaned in. And inheritance of his seat? Thorne flushed. Procedure, not murder. His handwriting sample from parliamentary files lay beside the note. Loops matched pressure similar, but the T-bar was higher. A conscious change, perhaps. Poirot asked about the safe. Thorne blinked. Sir Reginald kept donor lists there, big money for the bill. Stolen, motive indeed. Alibi. Walked to his flat 10 minutes away, no doorman. Weak. Practical tip. Map walking routes, look for shop cameras or passers-by. Thorne mentioned seeing the limping man outside earlier, asking for Hawthorne in broken English. Description. Dark coat, foreign accent, maybe Eastern European. A new thread. After the trio departed, Poirot and Japp compared notes over strong coffee. Lady Ashford's alibi, solid on surface, but perfume lingers. Colonel Black's boots and ink-raised flags. Thorne's handwriting teeters on forgery. Then the phone rang. The Savoy confirmed Lady Ashford left at 10:40, not 11. Cab dropped her 2 streets from Parliament at 10:55. Gap enough for return via passage. Alibi shattered. Poirot paced, excitement mounting. She argued left returned, angry, used passage, shot him, hid gun, stole files, escaped. But why the note in her scent? To lure him or frame another. He instructed Japp to bring her back quietly. Meanwhile, forensics called. Gun registered years ago to a dissolved security firm once hired by Colonel Black. Threads tightening. They revisited the passage at dusk. Poirot spotted a torn scrap of green wool caught on a nail matching Lady Ashford's suit. Practical example. Fibers bind people to places, send to lab. Deeper in a cigarette butt with lipstick, jasmine scented again. But Lady Ashford did not smoke. Twist. Someone else wore the perfume or planted evidence. Back at the yard, Lady Ashford arrived indignant. Explanation, madam, for the lie. She paled. I needed air, walked a bit before the cab. No return. Poirot laid the woolen butt before her. Green is your colour, non? And the lipstick? She touched her lips, nude shade. Not mine. Someone frames me. Poirot saw fear, now real fear. He dismissed her with a warning, then turned to Japp. The shattered alibi is too convenient. Someone wants us chasing her. The real killer plays chess. Colonel Black's gunthorns access the foreigner unseen. Practical tip. When alibis break too neatly, suspect misdirection. Night fell as Poirot returned home. He poured tisane and arranged clues on his table like cards. Passage, gun, note, safe, perfume, wool, butt, footprints. The law of silence hid more than state secrets, perhaps a personal vendetta disguised as politics. One suspect lied, but all concealed something. Wrapping up this chapter, interrogations cracked one alibi, yet revealed a deeper game of planted clues and borrowed sense. The board is set pieces move in shadows. Brace for Chapter 4, where Poirot follows the money trail and confronts the mysterious foreigner in a midnight rendezvous. Chapter 4. The midnight rendezvous and the foreigner's shadow moonlight bled through the iron railings of Westminster Bridge as Hercule Poirot stood motionless in the cold river wind. His overcoat collar turned up, his eyes fixed on the far embankment, where a lone figure limped beneath a gas lamp. The man wore a dark fedora pulled low and carried a small leather valise that swung with each uneven step. Poirot had arranged this meeting through a coded message slipped under the door of a known safe house in Limehouse. The note promised documents that would name the true hand behind the Parliament murder. Midnight. No police. Come alone. The limper paused, glanced at a pocket watch, then crossed toward the centre of the bridge. Poirot stepped from the shadows, his cane tapping once on the stone. You are punctual, monsieur. The man stiffened, his accent thick with Eastern vowels. You are the Belgian. Good, we speak fast. He opened the valise, revealing a sheaf of papers bound in red twine. These are the donor lists taken from the safe. Names that bought the law of silence. One name paid to stop it forever. Poirot took the bundle, careful not to disturb fingerprints. The top sheet bore a crest he recognized. A private bank in Zurich. Amounts in the hundreds of thousands routed through shell companies. At the bottom, a single line in pencil. Payment to M for services rendered. The initial matched the cigarette butt found in the passage. The limper watched Poirot's face. You see now, the law was never about security. It was a ledger, silence for sale. A sudden clatter of boots echoed from the south end of the bridge. 3 figures in long coats spread out, cutting off retreat. The limper cursed under his breath and reached inside his coat. Poirot raised a hand. No violence yet. He recognized the lead man, a scarred enforcer known in Whitehall circles as the Colonel's shadow. Black sent you, Poirot called. The scarred man smiled without warmth. Return the papers, detective. No one needs to fall in the Thames tonight. The limper backed against the railing valise now clutched to his chest. Poirot stepped between them, his voice calm. You chase ghosts, monsieur. The lists are already photographed. He tapped his temple. Up here. The scarred man hesitated, then signaled. The trio advanced. The limper hurled the valise over the side papers, scattering like white moths into the black water. He vaulted the railing after them, vanishing with a splash that swallowed all sound. Gunfire cracked. Poirot dropped flat as bullets sparked off iron. He rolled behind a stone buttress, drawing a small pistol from his cane. The attackers fanned out, searching the riverbank below. One leaned over the edge spotlight, sweeping the current. Empty. The limper had melted into the night as completely as the documents. The scarred man spat a curse and turned to Poirot. This ends badly for you, Belgian. He melted back into the fog, his men following. Poirot rose, brushing grit from his coat. He descended the embankment stairs to the water's edge. A single sheet clung to a mooring post, sodden but legible. The Zurich crest, and one name remained. Marcus Black. The rest dissolved into pulp. Enough. He pocketed the fragment and hailed a passing cab. Back in his apartment, Poirot spread the wet paper beneath a lamp. The ink had bled, but the routing numbers stood clear. He telephoned a contact at the bank in Geneva. By dawn, confirmation arrived. The account belonged to a trust controlled by Colonel Black's late wife. Withdrawals began 6 months ago, coinciding with the first draft of the Law of Silence. Black had not supported the bill. He had auctioned it. Poirot poured tisane and stared at the fragment. The Colonel played both sides, champion in public, profiteer in private. The murder removed Hawthorne, who discovered the scheme and threatened exposure. The foreigner was the courier meant to deliver proof to the press. Now the courier swam for his life, and the proof floated in pieces. A knock sounded. Inspector Japp entered pale. The limper washed up downstream throat cut. Valise gone. They are tying threads, Poirot murmured. Japp handed over a fresh report. Thorne has vanished. Flat cleared. Lady Ashford under protection after a brick through her window. The net tightens, but on whom? Poirot folded the bank fragment into his wallet. Tomorrow we confront the Colonel on his own ground. The hunt moves to the heart of the beast. Wrapping up this chapter, a midnight exchange on the bridge exposed the financial rot beneath the law, only for violence to scatter the evidence and claim another life. The Colonel's shadow lengthens. Steel yourself for Chapter 5, where Poirot storms the lion's den and faces the man who would sell silence for gold. Chapter 5. The Lion's Den and the Price of Gold Dawn painted the Thames the colour of old pewter as Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp rolled through the wrought iron gates of Blackwood Manor. The Colonel's country seat crouched among ancient oaks, its chimneys exhaling lazy smoke. Gravel crunched beneath the tyres of the police Bentley. 2 constables in plain clothes followed in a second car. Japp had secured a warrant at first light, citing the recovered bank fragment and the dead courier. Poirot sat silent, his gloved hands resting on the silver head of his cane. Today the little grey cells would roar. The great oak door swung open before they knocked. A butler with the bearing of a sergeant major stepped aside. Colonel Black awaited them in the library, his voice booming down the corridor. "Enter, gentlemen. Let us end this farce." The room smelled of leather and gun oil. Maps of forgotten campaigns covered the walls. A tiger skin sprawled before the hearth. Black stood beside a globe, his boots planted wide, a decanter of whiskey untouched on the table. "No limp today," Poirot noted. "You trespass on private ground," Black said, eyes cold steel. Japp produced the warrant. "We have questions about Zurich accounts and a drowned man." Black's jaw tightened, but he gestured to leather chairs. "Ask. I have nothing to hide." Poirot remained standing. "You funded the law of silence, then killed the man who discovered it." Black laughed a short bark. "Absurd." "I championed the bill." Poirot laid the sodden bank fragment on the globe. "Your wife's trust paid M for services. The courier is dead. Silence purchased twice." Black's fingers drummed the globe once. "My wife handled charities. I knew nothing of trusts," Japp signalled. The constables began a methodical search. Drawers opened, books slid from shelves. In a false-bottomed campaign chest, they found a ledger bound in green morocco. Pages detailed payments to shell companies matching the Zurich routes. Black watched impassive until a constable lifted a small oilskin pouch. Inside lay a brass key and a single gold coin minted in Liechtenstein. The same crest as the bank. Poirot turned the coin between his fingers. Payment for the courier, perhaps, or for the gunman. Black's composure cracked. "That coin is a keepsake from the war." Poirot smiled without warmth. "War ended 20 years ago, Colonel. This mint opened last spring." He pocketed the coin. "We also seek Elias Thorne. The young MP vanished after your men chased papers into the river. Black poured whiskey at last hands steady. Thorne was a fool. He found my ledger copied. Pages threatened exposure unless paid. I refused. He ran." Poirot leaned closer. "So you sent the scarred man to silence him too?" Black met his gaze. "Prove it." A shout from the hall. Japp strode out. In the gunroom, the constables uncovered a locked cabinet. The key from the pouch fit. Inside a revolver, identical to the one in the fireplace. Serial numbers filed the same way. Residue in the barrel fresh. Black's face drained of colour. That cabinet has not been opened in years. Poirot examined the lock. Scratches new. Someone placed it recently to frame you, perhaps, or to retrieve it. He sniffed the barrel. Fired within days. Black sank into a chair, the fight leaving him. "Thorne," he muttered. The boy had access to the manor. He must have planted it. Jap cuffed Black pending further inquiry. As they led him out, a groundskeeper ran up breathless. "Sir, there's a lad in the stables claims he saw Mr. Thorne last night riding off on a motorcycle. Left a note in the saddle room." The constable retrieved a folded sheet. Poirot read aloud. "The law will speak even if I cannot. Meet me at the old mill on the river at dusk. No police or the proof burns." Black shook his head. "The boy plays hero. He has copies." Poirot folded the note. "Then we ride to the mill. The colonel travels with us insurance against ambush." Jap nodded. The hunt turned again. The manor receded. Behind them, as the cars sped toward the crumbling mill on the upper Thames, sun bled across the water, turning reeds to spears of gold. Thorne waited, or a trap did. Either way, the ledger of silence was about to open its final page. Wrapping up this chapter, the lion's den yielded gold ledgers and planted guns. Yet the prey slipped the noose once more, leaving a desperate summons at dusk. The river calls. Prepare for chapter 6, where the old mill hides fire and the last witness faces judgment. Chapter 6, Fire at the Old Mill and the Final Ledger. The old mill crouched beside the Thames like a broken tooth, its water wheel frozen mid-turn by decades of rust. Sunset bled crimson across the sky, and the river carried the smell of wet stone and decay. Poirot stepped from the Bentley, his shoes sinking into the mud of the towpath. Jap followed with 2 armed constables. Colonel Black remained cuffed in the second car, a constable at each door. No chances. The mill door hung ajar, exhaling warm air and the faint crackle of flames. Poirot raised a hand. Silence. He listened. A muffled cough from within, then the scrape of boots on wood. He drew his pistol cane and moved forward. Jap flanked left constable's right. They entered single file into a cavern of shadows. Moonlight speared through gaps in the roof, illuminating sacks of grain long turned to dust. In the centre, a fire burned in an iron brazier, papers curling black at the edges. Elias Thorne stood over it, face streaked with soot, a petrol can at his feet. "Stop, Thorne," Jap barked. "Step away from the flames." The young MP spun eyes wild. "You are too late. The proof burns." He kicked another sheaf into the brazier. Pages flared, names and numbers vanishing in smoke. Poirot advanced slowly. "You run, you hide, you destroy. Why, monsieur? To protect a ghost?" Thorne laughed, a cracked sound. "To protect the living." Hawthorne was going to expose everything. The bribes, the foreign accounts. I begged him to wait to let me fix it. He refused. So I fixed him. He reached behind a sack and lifted the missing revolver from the manor cabinet. One shot through the heart. Locked door, passage, escape. Clean. Poirot kept his voice level. "And the courier?" Thorne shook his head. "That was Black's dog, the scarred man. I only wanted the files gone. Black wanted mouths shut forever." He glanced at the brazier. "This ends it. No evidence, no trial, no scandal." Jap edged closer. "Put the gun down, son." Thorne's hand trembled. "Never." He raised the revolver. Constables shouted. Poirot stepped directly into the line of fire. "You shoot me and the ledger lives elsewhere. Copies mailed this morning to 3 newspapers. Your confession is already ink." Thorne wavered. The fire roared higher, fed by a sudden gust. Sparks leapt to the dry sacks. Flames licked upward, racing along beams. Poirot lunged, seizing Thorne's wrist. The gun barked once into the rafters. They fell together, rolling across the floorboards. Jap wrestled the revolver free. Constables dragged Thorne clear as the roof groaned. Poirot rose coughing. The brazier toppled, petrol spilling. Fire exploded across the floor, cutting off the exit. Jap shouted orders. "Back door." They stumbled through a side hatch into the night air. Behind them, the mill blossomed into inferno. Timbers crashing, water wheels spinning free for the first time in years. Before the whole structure collapsed into the river in a hiss of steam and ash, Thorne sat cuffed on the bank, head bowed. Only smoke and cinders remained of his evidence. Poirot brushed soot from his coat. The newspapers will have their copies by dawn. Your silence burns with the mill. Jap radioed for fire crews and transport. Colonel Black watched from the car window, face unreadable. As engines wailed in the distance, Poirot crouched beside Thorne. "One question, monsieur. The perfume on the note. Why jasmine?" Thorne looked up, tears cutting channels through the grime. "Lady Ashford's bottle. I took it from her office. Wanted you to chase her first." A red herring that almost worked. Headlights swept the scene. Reporters already converging, drawn by the blaze. Tomorrow the law of silence would die in headlines, not Parliament. The plot unravelled in fire and confession. Wrapping up this chapter, the mill burned, the killer confessed, and the ledger of secrets turned to ash, yet copies fly to press. The circle closes. Stand by for Chapter 7, where the house itself trembles, and the final vote decides more than law. Chapter 7. The House in Chaos, and the Vote of No Return. The Houses of Parliament glowed under floodlights at 6:30 on a raw October morning. News vans jammed the embankment, their satellite dishes tilting like hungry birds. Reporters shouted questions into the dawn fog, while photographers jostled for shots of every MP who dared cross the threshold. Inside, the corridors rang with frantic footsteps and the rustle of hastily printed broadsheets. Front pages screamed in black ink. Law of silence. Author murdered by protégé, and bribes bought Parliament. The copies Thorne mailed had landed at dawn, and the building shook with the impact. Hercule Poirot walked the long corridor flanked by Jap and 4 constables. His shoes clicked on the mosaic floor in perfect rhythm. Members stared as he passed. Some whispered behind hands, others turned away. The air smelled of coffee fear and printer toner. Poirot carried a slim dossier under one arm, the surviving fragments of the Zurich ledger sealed in plastic. Enough to bury reputations, but not the full picture. That would come in the chamber. The speaker's procession swept past robes of black and gold, the mace gleaming. Debate on the law of silence was scheduled for 10 o'clock emergency session called by the Prime Minister himself. Poirot entered the Strangers' Gallery above the Commons. Below, the green benches filled rapidly. Lady Victoria Ashford took her usual place on the opposition side, her face pale but composed. Colonel Black arrived in custody, escorted by 2 officers. He wore a plain suit, no medals, his wrists cuffed in front. MPs gasped. Cameras flashed from the press gallery opposite. Elias Thorne was brought in last, shackled and flanked by prison guards. His suit hung loose after a night in the cells. He stared straight ahead, refusing to meet any gaze. The public gallery erupted in shouts of shame and traitor until the speaker banged the gavel for silence. Order. This house will have order. The Prime Minister rose, first voice grave. In light of revelations, this bill is withdrawn, effective immediately. A cheer went up from the opposition. He continued, "A full inquiry will examine all funding sources and security breaches. Colonel Black and Mr. Thorne will face charges of conspiracy to pervert justice and murder." The chamber buzzed like a hive kicked open. Lady Ashford stood next. Her words cut through the noise. This law was poison dressed as protection. It nearly silenced us all. Let this be a lesson. Sunlight is the best guard against corruption. Applause thundered from half the benches. Black stared at the floor, unmoving. Thorne flinched with every shout. Poirot watched from above his eyes, cataloguing reactions. A junior minister slipped out, pale and sweating. A whip counted heads frantically. In the corner, a grey-haired peer pocketed a mobile phone, his face ashen. The ledger had named more than 2 men. Ripples would spread for months. At 11:30, the Speaker called the emergency vote. Shall the law of silence proceed to second reading? The electronic board lit green for no, red for aye. Numbers climbed. 412 to 187. The aye column froze, then died. The bill was dead. The chamber erupted again. Cheers, boos. The rustle of order papers flung in celebration or despair. Poirot descended to the lobby where Jap waited with a fresh warrant. The junior minister was already in a side room, sweating under questioning. He had routed 2 payments through a Cayman account. More would follow. The colonel was led away, his shoulders slumped for the first time. Thorne followed head high now, defiant in defeat. Outside, the fog had lifted. Sunlight struck the Victoria Tower, turning stone to gold. Poirot paused on the steps, breathing the cold air. Japp joined him, lighting a cigarette. "End of the line, old friend." Poirot shook his head. "Merely the end of one act. The little grey cells tell me the ledger had a silent partner still in these halls. Watch the shadows, Inspector. They shift but do not vanish." A reporter thrust a microphone forward. "Monsieur Poirot, will there be more arrests?" Poirot smiled thinly. "Justice is patient, mademoiselle. It counts every coin." He tipped his hat and walked toward the waiting car. Wrapping up this chapter, the House rejected the poisoned law in a storm of scandal and confession. Yet Poirot senses one name still unwritten. The curtain falls on Parliament, but not on the hunt. Hold tight for Chapter 8, where a secret diary surfaces in Brussels and the trail crosses the Channel one last time. Chapter 8. The Brussels Diary and the Silent Partner. A thin rain fell on Brussels the following week, turning the Grand Place into a mirror of grey sky and golden lights. Hercule Poirot stepped from the Eurostar at Midi Station, his valise light, but his mind heavy. A courier had delivered a package to his London flat at dawn. A small leather-bound diary wrapped in oilskin postmarked Belgium no return address. Inside the first page bore a single line in spidery French. For the Belgian who sees what others miss. The rest was written in code. Poirot checked into the Hotel Amigo, a quiet place near the square where the concierge knew to ask no questions. He spread the diary on the writing desk beneath a green-shaded lamp. The cipher was Child's Play 4. His trained eye, a simple substitution based on the Flemish alphabet, shifted 3 places. Within an hour, the text lay plain. Dates, payments, initials. One name repeated like a heartbeat. VL, always beside the largest sums. VL had paid Thorne to plant the gun, paid Black to champion the bill, paid the scarred man to clean the river. VL was the architect. Poirot poured a finger of Calvados and studied the final entry dated 3 days before Hawthorne's death. Meeting at the Cinquantenaire, 22 Wanzhou. Bring the English ledger, burn after. He knew the park well, triumphal arches, vast lawns perfect for a discreet exchange. He telephoned Japp, who promised Belgian liaison within the hour. By dusk, a plainclothes officer named Sergeant Martins waited in the lobby, thick-set and silent. They drove to the park in an unmarked Peugeot. Floodlights bathed the central arch in cold white. Tourists had gone. Only wind moved the leaves. Poirot and Martins took positions behind the stone balustrade. At 21:58, a tall figure in a camel coat appeared beneath the arch carrying a metal briefcase. The face was shadowed, but the stride unmistakable. Lady Victoria Ashford. She stopped beneath the arch, checking a gold watch. A second figure emerged from the darkness opposite, the scarred man alive and unmarked by the Thames. He carried a thick envelope. They spoke too low for words to carry. Ashford opened the briefcase, revealing stacks of euros. The scarred man slid the envelope inside. Poirot stepped into the light cane tapping. Bonsoir, Lady Ashford. The game ends here. She spun eyes wide, then calm. Monsieur Poirot, always theatrical. The scarred man reached for his coat. Martins levelled a pistol. None. Hands where I see them. Ashford smiled without warmth. You have the wrong villain, detective. I fund transparency, not murder. She gestured to the briefcase. Money to expose the bribes, not bury them. Poirot opened the diary to the coded page. VL Victoria Langford, your maiden name. Payments to silence, not to speak. She glanced at the text and the mask slipped. You cannot prove intent. The scarred man growled. Let me end this. Martins cocked the pistol. Ashford raised a hand. No. She faced Poirot. Hawthorne was my friend once. He discovered the ledger and came to me for help. I tried to buy time. Thorne panicked and killed him. Black wanted everything burned. I wanted the truth controlled. Poirot shook his head. Controlled truth is still a lie, madame. You paid for the gun in the fireplace, the perfume on the note, the brick through your own window. Theatre to cast yourself the victim. Ashford's chin lifted. The law would have passed without scandal. I gave the press the copies to kill it cleanly. A necessary sacrifice. Martins cuffed her, while the scarred man was bundled into a second car that screeched to a halt. Poirot pocketed the diary. Back in London, the Crown prosecution would add conspiracy and accessory after the fact. The circle closed across the Channel. On the midnight train home, Poirot watched city lights slide past the window. The diary lay sealed in an evidence bag beside him. Every name accounted for every coin traced. Yet one line in the final page still puzzled him, written in plain English. The Belgian will understand when the clock strikes 13. He glanced at his watch. 23:59. He smiled. Tomorrow, perhaps. Wrapping up this chapter, the diary crossed borders, unveiled the silent partner, and tied every thread in a Brussels park at night. Justice boards the train. Wait for Chapter 9, where Poirot returns to London for the trial of the century, and one last surprise waits inside the clock tower itself. Chapter 9. The Trial and the 13th Stroke. The Old Bailey hummed like a hive under siege on the first day of November. Barristers in winged collars streamed through the marble halls, their briefcases stuffed with indictments and affidavits. Newspaper placards outside screamed, "Trial of the Silence," 3 in red ink. Crowds pressed against police cordons, waving handmade signs. Justice, not gagged, and hang the traitors. Hercule Poirot entered court number 1 at 9. Sharp, his black overcoat buttoned to the throat. He took the witness box reserved for him, the only seat with a perfect view of the dock. 3 defendants sat beneath the royal coat of arms. Colonel Marcus Black on the left wrists, cuffed face carved from granite. Elias Thorne in the centre, younger eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Lady Victoria. Ashford on the right, immaculate in charcoal silk, her gaze steady as winter steel. The public gallery overflowed. Reporters balanced notebooks on knees. Tourists craned for photographs until the usher barked silence. The clerk read the charges in a voice that carried to the rafters. Conspiracy to murder Sir Reginald Hawthorne. Conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, bribery of public officials. The defendants pleaded not guilty in turn, their voices ringing clear. The judge, a hawk-faced woman named Dame Eleanor Crane, adjusted her spectacles and nodded to the prosecution. Sir Geoffrey Holt KC, rose silk robes, rustling. He began with the locked room, the passage, the hidden gun, the perfume, the forged note. Each piece of evidence appeared on a screen behind him, enlarged for the jury. Then came the ledger fragments, the Zurich transfers, the Brussels diary. Holt painted a portrait of greed masquerading as patriotism. The law of silence was never about security, he thundered. It was a marketplace where votes were sold by the pound. Poirot watched the jury, 12 ordinary faces caught between horror and fascination. When his turn came, he spoke softly, yet every word landed like a gavel. He recounted the midnight bridge, the burning mill, the coded diary. He described the 13th stroke line, still unexplained. The clock in Parliament, he said, strikes 12 at noon and midnight. A 13th chime is impossible unless the mechanism is tampered with. Someone wished me to look inside the tower itself. The defence barristers circled like wolves. Black's counsel argued his client was framed by Thorne. Thorne's blamed Black's muscle. Ashford's claimed she orchestrated exposure, not murder. Cross-examination grew fierce. Poirot remained unruffled, repeating only facts. The little grey cells do not invent, they arrange. At 4 o'clock the court adjourned. Poirot slipped away through a side door into the chill evening. Big Ben loomed across the river, its face glowing gold. He crossed Westminster Bridge alone, the wind whipping his coat. The public entrance to the clock tower was locked, but a maintenance key obtained by Japp earlier waited beneath a flower pot. Poirot climbed the 393 steps, his breath even his cane-tapping stone. At the belfry level, moonlight spilled through the open arches. The great bell hung silent, its hammer still. On the mechanism housing, someone had chalked a fresh mark, 13. Poirot brushed it away, revealing a small brass plate newly screwed in place. Beneath lay a cavity. Inside, a final envelope sealed with red wax. He broke it open. A single photograph. Sir Reginald Hawthorne alive, shaking hands with a fourth man, whose face was scratched out. On the back, in Hawthorne's hand, "If I die, expose VL and the clockmaker." A tiny brass gear was taped beside the words, identical to those in the Elizabeth Tower mechanism. Poirot turned the gear over. Engraved on the reverse, "Property of H. Langford. Victoria's brother, a master horologist long thought dead in the war." Footsteps echoed below. Poirot pocketed the evidence and descended. At the landing, he met Japp panting. Found this in Ashford's safe at the manor. A twin envelope. Inside another photograph this time, the brother alive in Brussels last month. The silent partner had a face after all. Back in court the next morning, Poirot returned to the box. He laid the gear and photograph on the rail. Lady Ashford's composure cracked for the first time. The judge demanded explanation. Ashford rose, voice trembling. "My brother survived the camps. He built the ledger system to protect whistleblowers, not sell silence. Hawthorne twisted it. I tried to stop him." The jury retired at noon. Big Ben struck 12 true chimes only. At 12:13 the bell gave one extra shudder, a mechanical ghost. The courtroom froze. Poirot smiled. The 13th stroke. The clockmaker's confession from beyond the grave. The jury returned in 40 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Black stared ahead. Thorne wept silently. Ashford bowed her head as sentence was passed. Life for murder, 20 years for conspiracy. The gavel fell like a guillotine. Outside snow began to fall soft and muffling. Poirot stood beneath the tower watching flakes melt on his gloves. Japp joined him. "Case closed?" Poirot tilted his head. "The clock is repaired, the law is dead. The guilty are caged. Yet somewhere a gear still turns." He tapped his temple. The little grey cells rest, but never sleep. Wrapping up this chapter, the trial delivered justice, the tower revealed its secret, and the 13th stroke rang for truth alone. One chapter remains. Await chapter 10, where Poirot takes tea in his flat, reflects on silence, and receives a visitor no one expected. Chapter 10. Tea. Silence and the visitor at the door. Hercule Poirot closed the door of his Baker Street flat with a soft click that sounded final as a coffin lid. The fire crackled low in the grate, throwing long shadows across the Persian rug. He removed his overcoat and hat, hanging them on the stand with the same precision he had applied to every clue in the Parliament plot. Snow tapped the window pane like impatient fingers. He set the kettle on the spirit lamp, measured exactly 3 spoonfuls of lapsang souchong into the warmed pot, and waited for the whistle. Order and method even in solitude. The trial had ended 3 days earlier. The newspapers had moved on to fresh scandals, leaving only the smell of printer's ink and the echo of gavel blows. Blackthorn and Ashford were now numbers in Wormwood Scrubb's ledgers. The law of silence had been buried with its victims. Yet the little grey cells refused to rest. The brass gear from the clock tower lay on the mantel beside the photograph of Hawthorne and the scratched-out face. The engraving H. Langford glowed in the firelight, a loose thread that refused to lie flat. Poirot poured the tea into a porcelain cup, thin as eggshell, and carried it to his armchair. He inhaled the smoky aroma and let memory unspool. Every detail returned in perfect sequence. The locked office, the secret passage, the hidden revolver, the jasmine note, the burning mill, the Brussels diary, the 13th stroke. He had arranged them like pieces on a chessboard and declared checkmate. But chessboards have edges, and this game had spilled beyond them. He set the cup down untouched and crossed to the desk. A small parcel had arrived that morning, postmarked Geneva no sender. He slit the brown paper with a silver letter opener. Inside lay a second diary identical to the Brussels one, but bound in black leather. The first page bore Hawthorne's monogram. Poirot opened it with steady fingers. The entries began 6 months before the murder. Hawthorne had suspected a leak in his inner circle. He wrote in a hurried scrawl, "May Viel proposes funding through Zurich. Says it will secure votes. I smell extortion. Chai May." Followed Thorne to Limehouse. Met scarred man. Exchanged envelope. June. Discovered H.L. alive. Victoria's brother. Clockmaker. Built the cipher system. September. Confronted Viel. She claims she wants exposure on her terms. Lies. October. Will expose all in the house tomorrow. If I die, look to the tower. The final entry, dated the night of the murder, was only 3 lines. Midnight meeting in office. Thorne brings revised clauses. Trust no one. The clock will strike 13. Poirot closed the diary. Hawthorne had known everything and walked into the trap anyway. The revised clauses were the lure. Thorne had shot him, hid the gun in the fireplace, stolen the donor lists, and left the jasmine note to frame Ashford. Victoria had orchestrated the rest, paying the scarred man to chase the courier into the Thames, planting the revolver in Black's cabinet, sending the coded diary to Brussels to be found later. The 13th stroke was Hawthorne's insurance, a mechanical scream from the grave, triggered by a hidden spring that H. Langford had installed years earlier during routine maintenance. When the jury verdict was read, the clock's counterweight had shifted 1 extra tooth. The bell had obeyed. Poirot returned to the fire. One question remained. Who sent the black diary? He turned to the last page. A single photograph was taped there. Hawthorne and H. Langford standing beneath Big Ben, both alive, both smiling. On the back in Hawthorne's hand. To the only man who will understand. Tell my wife I tried. The kettle had gone cold. Poirot lit it again and prepared a second cup. He carried both to the table and waited. At precisely 7 o'clock the doorbell rang 3 measured chimes. He opened it to reveal a woman in her late 50s, veiled in black, her gloved hands clasped around a small handbag. She lifted the veil. "Hawthorne's widow, Monsieur Poirot," she said, voice soft as falling snow. "Reginald said if anyone could finish what he started, it would be you." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I have waited until the trial's ended. The children are safe abroad. Now I can speak." Poirot led her to the fire and offered the second cup. She drank gratefully, then opened the handbag. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon. "Reginald wrote these in the weeks before he died. He mailed them to me from different post offices. He knew they were watching." She placed the bundle in Poirot's hands. "Read them, then burn them. The story must end with you. He untied the ribbon. The letters were addressed to his wife, but written as a confession. Hawthorne had agreed to sponsor the law of silence under pressure from foreign interests who promised campaign funds. When he discovered that bribes were funneling to Victoria Ashford and her brother, he tried to pull out. Thorne panicked and killed him on Ashford's orders. Black provided the muscle. H. Langford built the cipher and the clock mechanism as a dead man's switch. If Hawthorne died, the tower would reveal the truth. The final letter ended, "My dearest Eliza, if you read this, I am gone. Trust Poirot. He will see the pattern. Tell him the real silence was never in Parliament. It was in the hearts of those who sold their country for gold. Forgive me. Our Lady Hawthorne watched the flames. He was not perfect," she said, "but he died trying to make it right." She stood smoothing her gloves. "The children will never know the details. Let the world remember him as the man who opposed the law, not the man who almost passed it." Poirot escorted her to the door. At the threshold, she paused. "One more thing." She reached into her coat and produced a small velvet box. Inside lay a gold pocket watch, the twin of the one Hawthorne wore the night he died. "Open it." He pressed the catch. The face showed 13 hours. The hands were frozen at 12:13. On the inside lid, an engraving for the 13th stroke. Truth. She left as quietly as she had come. Poirot locked the door and returned to the fire. He fed the letters one by one into the flames, watching the paper curl and blacken. When only ash remained, he placed the black diary, the brass gear, the photograph, and the watch into a metal box. He carried it to the safe behind the bookshelf and turned the combination. Click. Silence. He poured the last of the tea, now cold, and drank it slowly. Outside, snow muffled the city. Inside, the fire settled into embers. The little grey cells finally rested. The Parliament plot was closed. Every coin counted, every secret spoken, every silence broken. He raised the empty cup to the shadows. "To you, Sir Reginald. The clock has struck 13 and the truth walks free." The fire popped once and died. In the hush that followed, Poirot allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Another case, another triumph of order over chaos. Tomorrow the world would wake to fresh mysteries. Tonight there was only the scent of lapsang and the soft ticking of a watch that would never strike again. Wrapping up this final chapter, every thread is tied, every motive laid bare, every secret burned or buried. The tea is finished, the fire is out, and Hercule Poirot closes the book on the law of silence forever. Thank you for joining this journey. If the story moved you, like the video, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. Your support means the world to us. Until the next mystery, au revoir.